Good morning and welcome to Kunzang Payal Choling. We're pleased to show a teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon Lhamo that she gave back in 1990. And we hope you enjoy it. It's entitled Discriminating Bodhicitta. And so we will begin.
Today I would like to talk about Bodhicitta. But I would like to talk about it by connecting it with the thread of teaching that we have had recently. Over the past couple of months, we have put a great deal of focus into realizing one's own nature as the ultimate guru, realizing one's own nature, one's own Buddha nature as the ultimate object of refuge. And I have tried to speak of that and try to communicate that in many different ways. I have spent some time trying to give something of a more profound or deeper teaching so that one can understand what that nature is and how one would view that as being the ultimate liberation. But I've also tried to talk in a very practical, ordinary, and even common way. Sometimes I have used humor extensively in order to bring the same points home, but to do it in such a way that we could reach it, touch it in our ordinary lives, that we could actually make it part of our ordinary perception and begin to work with our ordinary minds in terms of taming them and causing them to remain more firmly focused toward enlightenment. So I've used a lot of different methods, and sometimes it perhaps wasn't even recognizable that this was what I was teaching. But in the same way that the children communicate the depth of their awareness through some creative experience, perhaps the teaching was given in such a way that some element of truth was communicated, even though it wasn't clear point by point how it related to the central theme that we had presented for this period of time. But one element we have not discussed in relationship to realizing the mind as the ultimate guru is bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is considered to be a most foundational and extraordinary teaching in Mahayana Buddhism. It is the teaching and understanding of compassion. In our everyday lives, we understand compassion actually in a very distorted way. We don't have a full comprehension of what compassion means. In our ordinary lives, we think of ordinary human kindness. We think of, and kindness of course is relative to the way that we were brought up, to our culture. I've read about tribes, for instance, in Africa, who as part of their growing up or fertility rituals or empowerment rituals, that part of their empowerment procedures, part of their passages into adulthood, are involved with tattooing marks on their bodies and cutting certain images into their flesh. And it's really not much different than the fact that we pierce our ears. And it's not so much different than we go through many rites of passages. Many girls, upon growing up, receive their first permanent. Now, if you don't think that's physical disfigurement, you haven't had one. And so we all in our culture have different things like that we do. In this culture, however, if you think about this African culture, many of these rites having to do with cutting the flesh or tattooing, their procedures can be very painful. They can be very uncomfortable. And for some period of time afterwards, there can be some swelling and even a chance of infection. But the point is to make the disfigurement that one puts into the flesh stylish and appropriate according to the culture. Those that administer these rites often are priests of some kind. Priests or witch doctors or shamans, however you think of them. But they're priests. And they do this rite out of their concern for the well-being of the tribe. It is a compassionate act. Now, from our point of view, we might look at someone holding down an adolescent child and cutting things into their flesh to be a cruel act, especially when the child reacts with some evidence that they are in pain. But in that culture, that's a kind thing to do. And the child, having received this rite of passage, having moved through that event, would then be very proud and very happy that that had happened, and would not trade that experience for anything in the world. So meaningful is it to them. Now, in our culture, we might think that those people were unkind, that they're cruel to their children. But that's because our understanding is very provincial. It's very limited. We do not understand what is important to them. On the other hand, there are different peoples and different cultures that might look at what we do to our children when we force them to go to school for so many hours a day, force them to work so hard until they're very stressed out, force them to achieve and to compete with their peers in mind-boggling ways, in ways that are subtle but sometimes very traumatic. And other cultures might look at us and think that we are exceedingly cruel to our children. We, of course, don't view it that way. We think we are making successes out of our children. We think that we are making our children into lawyers. Every culture has their own idea. So the human experience of kindness is very, very varied. It's very flowing. It's very much pertaining to the area in which it is practiced. When one understands bodhicitta, or kindness, from a Buddhist perspective, one would understand it quite differently. One would understand, for instance, that there is ordinary human kindness associated with the place in which one lives, and there is also ordinary human kindness that is pretty much universal, in that we can consider ordinary human kindness to be feeding the hungry. Well, whatever culture we are in, we want to feed the hungry. We want to see that everyone is fed. We want to see that everyone is clothed. We want to see that everyone has a place to live and has the opportunity to live to their greatest capacity in whatever way that meaning comes to them. So we have some things that are pretty much universal. But even within those universal understandings, there may be some variation. For instance, many of you may have read that it is the custom of or was at least the custom of the Eskimo people, that when a person became too old to contribute to the tribe, they would simply walk off into the snow. And feeding them would be a disservice to them. It would humiliate them. They wished to go and die because they no longer wished to be a burden to the tribe. It was humiliating to them to have to be given food and to be taken care of and not be able to pull their own weight. They did not wish to suffer that humiliation, neither did they wish to inflict that kind of inconvenience on their families. So they would walk off into the snow. But in our culture, that's a terrible thing. We want to take care of our elderly people. We want to take care of our parents. We can't think that we are prosperous enough, I suppose, that we can't think that a person's life becomes useless simply because they can't do anything. We wish to try to take care of them. It's simply a difference in perception. What's kind in one place is not kind in another. So even those universal ideas of feeding the hungry, even those have some variation. The Buddha teaches us that we should hold to these ordinary human kindnesses. Clearly, if we see a hungry child, we should feed it. Clearly, if we see some suffering that we have the power to alleviate, we should try to alleviate it. Clearly, if we see some situation that we can remedy, if it is within our power, then we should remedy it in order to benefit someone that might be suffering. The Buddha teaches us that as we walk through life, we should view that kindness as being very much a part of our practice. Sometimes those that practice Vajrayana have mixed ideas about what kindness is. And sometimes those people that have no particular spiritual practice have a great deal of confusion about what kindness is. Haven't you seen in ordinary situations, ordinary people being very well-meaning and very good and basically very kindly would allow others to become extremely dependent on them, and would allow others to continue being frail and needy and helpless and sometimes even neurotic by allowing them to be dependent or by doing things for them that would perpetuate their condition. I actually call that idiot compassion. In the long run, it is not necessarily compassionate. In the long run, it actually does more for the one acting out the compassion than it does for the one who is the object of that compassion. Often the person who is giving to the other and allowing the other to perpetuate their neuroses or their neediness is benefited in that they feel themselves to be good people. But the person who is receiving this so-called benefit is being made weaker and weaker and perhaps allowed to be more and more neurotic. So it may not necessarily be a very kind thing to do at all. However, the Buddha teaches us that we should develop some discrimination about what true kindness actually is, and we should practice accordingly. The Buddha, however, gives us some very hard and fast rules about compassion. For instance, from the Buddhist perspective, there is only one cessation of suffering. There is only one true end of suffering. The Buddha teaches us that there is nothing that one can do during the course of one's life using the ordinary circumstances and situations and tools of one's life to permanently alleviate suffering. You can feed the poor, you can heal the sick, you can give friendship to someone who is lonely. But even if you manage to fill that particular need from this moment until the time of their death, you cannot fill their need after their death. And according to the Buddha, we are reborn again and again and again, and sentient beings cannot follow one another consciously and purposefully from one incarnation to another. So if I decide to single one of you out and feed you for the rest of your life so that you never want for any food, there is still a situation in which I cannot follow you, perhaps, to your next life and be sure that you are never hungry again. So the solution is temporary. It's a reasonable solution under those conditions, but it's temporary. The Buddha teaches us as well, if we manage to solve the problem of their poverty and their hunger and their loneliness, we still haven't solved the problem of old age, sickness, and death. Even if we cure one disease, there's no guarantee that there won't be another one. And even if we cure all diseases, we so far haven't found a cure to old age and death. The likelihood that these kinds of cures will happen are very slim. And according to the Buddha's teaching, even if you solve almost all the problems associated with cyclic existence, there are some problems that you simply cannot solve. But the Buddha teaches us that there is one cessation of all suffering, that there is one solution. And that solution is the state of precious awakening or pure cognition called enlightenment. So from the Buddhist perspective, the only real good that one can do another is to bring them closer to enlightenment. Again, the reminder here is that it doesn't relieve us of the responsibility of feeding the poor. It doesn't relieve us of the responsibility of trying to make medical advances towards healing the sick. It doesn't relieve us of the social responsibility associated with all of the needs of sentient beings, and not only of humans, of animals as well, and whatever other life form we come to understand. We are still responsible in whatever way we can possibly be. But when you have to make a choice between spending your whole life making enough money to, say, feed all the people in India, and who among us thinks they can do that, and doing what you can to achieve realization so that you can bring a method that ends suffering permanently to others, the choice should be a wise one. And according to the Buddha, it should be the latter choice. According to the Buddha, there is only one real help. And that help is that method that causes actual enlightenment. Now, even within that, there are many things that we must discriminate about. There are many spiritual paths, especially in America. Here in this country, there are many, many different methods and devices that one can use. When the lamas associated with Vajrayana Buddhism that came from India and Tibet to this country, they were appalled at our great misfortune, that we had so many avenues of spirituality open to us. And the reason why they considered this misfortune is that we could not possibly understand true value from all of the variety of methods that we could employ. We could not possibly discriminate under those conditions. How could we be expected to know? They were appalled to notice also that most of the methods that are called spiritual paths in this country were begun less than 50 years ago. And most of them were begun by people who were still living and had not themselves achieved realization in any way that was provable. So we had a problem. The problem was that we were offered many different kinds of food with no real teaching as to which was the nourishing. And we allowed ourselves to be razzle-dazzled by the multiplicity of opportunity. We allow ourselves to be appealed to in ways that appeal to a mind filled with discursive thought. And we have no real way to discriminate. We in our culture were not really brought up with a respect from birth for a truly enlightened mind. We were not really able to understand that there is actually enlightened presence that has appeared in the world. We were not able to understand that. And they sorrowed for our misfortune. And that seemed odd to us because as Americans, we are proud of all we have. We are proud that we have so many different methods. We are proud that there's so much for us to do. But according to the lamas, we're involved with busy work. And really they were appalled at the people who had given their lives, large chunks of their lives, to paths that have not and cannot produce enlightenment because they do not arise from the mind of enlightenment. Yet, within this sphere of spiritual delusion, most of the people that are involved in such activity believe that they are doing some good. And they're not bad people necessarily. There may be a few that are self-serving. There may be a few that are out for power, maybe, or glory, or deluded in such a way as to need to be up front. But most people were deluded in such a way as that they believed that any spiritual progress was good progress. And I myself have heard anything from massage therapy to vitamins being included within the spiritual realm. So, and I engage in massage therapy and I take vitamins. I'm not putting them down. But I wouldn't look at them as methods to achieve enlightenment, you see. There's a difference. According to the Buddha's teaching, then, there is a discrimination there that one must make. One must understand a true path to enlightenment. And one must understand that by, first of all, looking at the source. If the source is not the mind of enlightenment, the result cannot possibly be the mind of enlightenment. One must look to a fully awakened, realized being, a Buddha, one who has achieved the awakening to the Buddha nature. Nowhere in Vajrayana is it said that one should single out the historical Buddha and say that is the only Buddha that has ever been. In fact, the teachings indicate that there have been many who have achieved the state of precious awakening, but that there are signs associated with that awakening, and one should heed to those signs. And there are methods associated with following that path, and one should follow them exactly because they are a technology. And they are a technology that is meant to work. When we think about enlightenment, it's very hard for us to understand exactly what that is. And that's because in this society, in our culture, we've had no real view of it, no real understanding of it, and really no real respect for it. Enlightenment to us means as many different things as there are people in this room alone. According to our training, according to what we've been exposed to, there is a tremendous amount of variety. Yet according to the Buddha's teaching, the mind of enlightenment is indicated in certain specific ways. First of all, the mind of enlightenment has two accumulations. It realizes the nature of emptiness. It has accumulated the understanding or the awareness, the awakening to the nature of emptiness. And secondarily, the mind of enlightenment has accumulated all knowledge. And knowledge in the case of Buddhist teaching means the realization of all cause and effect interdependence, all cause and effect phenomena. Again, not wanting to go into this deeply, I will give a short demonstration of that, not a personal demonstration, but a short indication of what that means. Lord Buddha was able to look at any person under any condition and was able to see all of the cause and effect relationships that brought that person to this moment. If the person came before the Buddha was able to understand every single cause and effect relationship that built upon each other, that cause begat effect, and effect brought about more cause, and cause brought about more effect. That interdependence the Buddha was able to see not only since the beginning of this life, but since the beginning of every uncountable life through aeons and aeons of cyclic existence, through beginningless time that we in our ordinary perception cannot perceive until this moment. And from this moment is able to view every single cause and effect relationship that could possibly arise until that person achieves Buddhahood themselves. And through that awareness was able to teach them as no ordinary sentient being can possibly do. So that is a recognizable sign of the Buddha, Who do you know that has begun a religion that has that capacity? Again, the historical Buddha is not thought to be the only Buddha. And in our tradition, it is considered that there are many awakening minds, or called bodhisattvas, who are poised on the moment of enlightenment, and yet have chosen to remain within cyclic existence, poised right on the brink of enlightenment. The lamas that I know consider Jesus to have been one of those. Just because of the signs, they have no actual teaching on him, but just because of the signs that he indicated, the signs that occurred at the time of his death, are very similar to signs that the lamas who have achieved enlightenment had at the time of their death. Tremendous signs of extraordinary realization. Why am I going all the way around the bush to make a point? Because the point that I'm making is very hard. It's about a personal discrimination that one must develop, and a choice that one must make. A choice involving truly compassionate activity. Because if one accepts what the Buddha has taught, which is that all cyclic existence is pervaded with suffering, and one accepts as well that there is in fact a cessation of suffering, and that that cessation of suffering is called enlightenment, and that in that state of awakening that the Buddha describes as enlightenment, as being awake, in that state there are no longer the cause and effect relationships due to desire, due to ego clinging, that create all suffering. Therefore, that state of awakening is the cessation of all suffering. And if one believes that that is the state of all suffering, and from that point of view, as an awakening mind, as a bodhisattva or as a Buddha, one can actually engage in activity that brings about the end or cessation of suffering of others due to bringing them to the same kind of level of awareness, or bringing them to the path that affords that kind of awareness. One must actually make a choice then as to whether one will engage in utilizing one's life in such a way. Will one actually offer, as these children are learning about offering, offer one's life as a vehicle for enlightenment in order to benefit beings? Then, if one wishes to do that, one has to discriminate between that kind of activity actually arising from the mind of enlightenment, traveling on the path that arises from the mind of enlightenment, and therefore completing in the state of enlightenment, or whether one simply wants to be involved in spiritual activity. The difference is like the difference between walking through the door of liberation and walking around the house thinking about the door of liberation. There's a tremendous difference there. There may be a point at which one has to accept that one has to walk around the house thinking about the door of liberation, but it doesn't have to take nearly so long as we give it. One can use spiritual discrimination now. One has that power. Once one has engaged completely on a method that has produced enlightenment in countless others, because it has arisen from the mind of enlightenment, and the fruit has been tasted again and again and again, and is proven to be successful. Once one commits to a path like that, and begins to practice a path like that, one has engaged in ultimate compassionate activity. Because only as a Buddha, or as a really high-level bodhisattva, can one bring any real benefit to sentient beings. And it's not like these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas reincarnate, and come back to the world and make up their own path. They teach the Buddha's teachings. They teach the teachings that arise from the mind of enlightenment and result only in enlightenment, visibly, again and again and again. There are stories, for instance, and of course I must reflect on the lineage stories that I know, but there are stories of the lamas in my lineage that each one of them was able to confer the Buddha's teachings from the Vajrayana perspective, and their disciples attained such miraculous signs as the rainbow body, such miraculous signs as their bodies producing extraordinary relics at the time of death. You can't produce this without enlightenment. Their bodies producing sweet scent and extraordinary, visible to groups, signs at the time of their death. I have some relics from the bodies of lamas that have produced such signs. Extraordinary things. The difference between a practice like that and simply ordinary spiritual activity is extraordinary. It's like the difference between the light that comes from a matchstick and the light of a million suns. They're both light, I guess, but inconceivable difference. According to the Buddha's teaching, one can only bring about the cessation of suffering in others by offering them the method that has brought the desired result. And that method must be transmitted through pure lineage transference. That is to say, from teacher to student to teacher to student to teacher to student to teacher to student, in an unbroken lineage traceable to the actual mind of enlightenment. And it must be seen that this method has brought fruit again and again and again. That must be understood. And upon practicing in such a way, one is then able to confer the same blessing in some future time. In the Mahayana path, and from the Mahayana point of view, all sentient beings are considered to be equal, of equal weight and equal value. That is to say, all humans are equal, no matter what their philosophical belief is, what their religion is, what their race is, what their personal creed is, what their personal ethics are, what any kind of preference is in any portion of their life. They are exactly equal and of the same weight. According to that perspective, the highest Lama who has achieved the highest realization is exactly the same weight as any ordinary sentient being. And any human being is exactly the same weight as even the smallest creature that crawls on the earth. The Buddha teaches the equality of all that lives. The equality, the absolute equality in all methods and in all ways of all that lives, based on the understanding that within each sentient being resides the completed seed of Buddhahood. Perhaps one has not yet awakened to that seed of Buddhahood. Perhaps one has not yet tasted one's nature. But the seed is intact. It is permanently complete. It is free of any defilement. No matter what one does, one cannot defile that seed. It is never, under any conditions, tainted. That is not possible. Each sentient being has within them the seed of Buddhahood, therefore is in potential and is destined to be eventually a Buddha. Each and every one. Therefore, we have the responsibility as Buddhists to consider all sentient beings to be equal, to understand them in this respect, as the Buddha teaches us, that all sentient beings have as their nature that Buddha nature. But in the condition that we find ourselves, in relative condition, we have something else in common. We all wish to be happy, and we do not know that we have that nature, and we do not know how to make ourselves happy. And not knowing how to be happy, we struggle. And there's a 50-50 chance that we'll produce either bad or good results. We simply struggle. And according to the Buddha, therefore, because of those things, we must consider all sentient beings to be as important as we ourselves are. Well, in theory, we understand that. Oh, yes, this is the new age. We all understand equality, don't we? Yes, indeed. But when's the last time you forgot about searching for your own happiness and searched honestly for the happiness to benefit sentient beings? Sure, we understand the equality of all that lives, but when's the last time you considered everybody really equal with you? Sure, we understand the equality of all that lives in theory, but when's the last time you didn't look at someone and say, oh yeah, they're in that group. That's that gender. That's that group. That's that preference. That's that religion. When? No, our understanding may be theoretical, but it certainly isn't deep. We do not yet understand that. And true compassion in the Mahayana path, on this path that we practice, this Buddhist teaching, comes about when we understand the equality of all that lives, to the extent that we make the quantum leap of actually engaging in the spiritual discrimination that I just took all this long time to describe, and transforming our lives into a vehicle by which we can eventually bring about the cessation of suffering for all sentient beings. Only as a Buddha, only as an awakening Bodhisattva, can we possibly hope to contribute to this in any way. And only with true bodhicitta, true compassion, can we really come to understand that of sentient beings, I am only one, and in this room alone, there are many. Therefore, you are more important than me. Simply by weight alone. We must come to understand that. That is true compassion. That is true bodhicitta. Coincidentally, bodhicitta is so much like our own nature in its dance, in its movement, in its tendency to emanate in many forms that actually bring about benefit to sentient beings, is so much like our own nature that the more we practice this selflessness and this profound spiritual discrimination, letting go of all our crazy ideas about what things ought to be, and really practicing from the heart, the more we do that, the more egolessly we practice, the more we become less self-absorbed, the closer we move to enlightenment ourselves. Because in nature we are the very Lord. We are the Buddha. And in our movement, in our dance, as we awaken to that nature, we too will return again and again in order to benefit beings in one form or another until all suffering is gone. The more we practice that, the more we taste our nature. The more we taste our nature, the more we act naturally in accordance with true compassion. It is a total understanding. And it really, I've seen it in traditional teachings divided up into little parts, into little segments. But I've only really seen it totally absorbed and totally utilized when one understands, firstly, the faults of cyclic existence. Secondarily, the true cessation of the suffering associated with cyclic existence. And thirdly, the equality of all that lives. And from the heart, from the depth of one's being, makes the most profound commitment to live in accordance with that kind of love, with that kind of awakening. It's only a decision that can be made from the heart. Yes, it must be made with the mind. You must study these things that I've pointed out today and be convinced of them on your own. But it must be made from the heart. You must be moved by understanding the condition of cyclic existence and by understanding its only solution. So I hope that you will take these teachings and bring them home with you. I say this again and again and again. If you come here and you're entertained by some woman talking in this nice way, or if you come here and you are somehow entertained because on occasion I use humor or whatever, or if you come here and are entertained because we serve lunch later, then please spend $6 and go to a movie. It's probably a lot more fun for you. The only way in which this has real weight for you, real value for you, is if you somehow take it home and at least make part of it part of your life and part of your thinking. And if you're moved to examine your own motivation and your own view and your own practice of kindness in any way, then certainly it has been worth your time. So please do that. Please take whatever you can of this teaching home with you. Please allow yourself to be moved in whatever way possible. And please come back and practice with us again. Thank you very much for coming today, truly.
Thank you so much for coming today. We're always happy to see you and or virtually see you. And we hope you enjoy the teachings. We show these teachings every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and it's part of our spiritual programs. And in addition, it's generally followed by meditation and teachings, usually by Khenpo Tenzin Karzai, and will be next week. But this week, we have the final week of Atira Zioli's series on Tonglen, and that's in person and on YouTube and Facebook, 11:30 a.m. So it follows this in about 45 minutes, and it's a meditation, teaching, and Shinrezi practice, very short Shinrezi practice to bring about compassion, but also to just, sort of close out the practice with dedications. Atira's teachings on Tonglen are really wonderful, and they are archived on YouTube. So you can see them there, probably also on Facebook. The Khenpo Karzai's teachings are also fantastic and are archived on YouTube and Facebook, and they are available to you anytime. You can just go and search for them. So in addition, there's a Saturday morning meditation at 10 a.m., Medicine Buddha practice every day at every evening at 5:30. It's very, very short. It's in English, and that's a wonderful place to go if you've got, someone you're worried about or yourself you're worried about health-wise. And, for any reason, really, Medicine Buddha is good for anything. So you can join in there, and that's on YouTube and Facebook. As well, we have a soak offering every day. They're generally at 7 p.m. and I believe today is also at 7 p.m. Woohoo! And so you can come on Zoom or in person and do what is often a Ratnalingpa Kalaya practice. That's our general practice, but every once in a while gets switched off based on the needs of the world or of individuals, people. So Jetsunma calls it, and it's always good. So there we are. Also, there's a drum circle live on Sundays at live, and I think it's right after the meditation and teachings. So come and check it out. Anytime here at KPC. Our website is tara.org, and you can find out where just about everything is by going down the front page of it and looking for a calendar. And when you go on the calendar, you can click on it and it will show you where it's being, what vehicle it's using and online, and how to get there, and what the codes are, and even usually what the practice is. So come join us anytime. We'd love to see you. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you on Sunday.